Welcome to E4 Electric live from Bangkok. Today we're going to talk about not a very controversial topic. I'm sure everybody is going to get along. We're going to talk about who's better, Trump or Harris. But we are going to limit the topic to just electric cars. So essentially the topic is, right here. Who's better for electric cars and trucks, Trump or Harris? And just in a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by Tom Moloughney from State of Charge. We haven't done that in a while. He's actually in America. I am in Thailand. We're going to have a good time. Let me know where you're watching me from, which platform you're watching me on. We're also going to try to, not throw mud at each other. Please be respectful in your comments. For me, I have to give you guys a disclaimer. I am a true independent. I'm not a Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. I don't like neither one of the candidates. I'm not going to vote for either one of them. However, I also think, just like Biden administration has done a lot of good things, Trump has also done some things that I think was good. So I am, I feel like I'm very balanced. So the comment like this is going to get you banned. Okay, the great Babu, we're not here to talk like 5-year-olds. We're going to actually have a discussion. So please stay adults or you're just going to get banned. Okay. Now, so before I bring Tom in, I want to say that actually, I think a lot of people think that the answer is very obvious, because just generally, liberals were more have always been pro green energy, and conservatives were against. But I think the answer here is not as easy as you guys would think. So I actually have a few interesting points to make. Feel free to make your points in the chat, but again, please be respectful. But before I bring Tom in, let me play a few clips from, and like I said, I think we know where Kamala Harris stands on it. She is part of a Biden administration. They have passed the infrastructure bill that provides for $7,500. It used to be a tax credit, but now it's essentially an incentives. There's about $4,000 for used cars. They allocated billions of dollars for infrastructure. So it's fair to say we kind of know what their position is, because they're in power right now. So let's talk about, let me play a few clips of Donald Trump. The first clip I'm going to play is from his speech at the Republican National Convention. Here we go.
And I will end the electric vehicle mandate on day one.
Okay, so he basically, and he said it many times, that he's going to end the electric mandate on day one. So there are a couple of things to be said. First of all, there is no electric car mandate right now that a U.S. president, no matter who he or she is, can just cancel out. The bill was passed with Congress, so in order to cancel that bill, you would have to pass another bill with the Congress. However, president and administration can reallocate the funds. There is a mandate in California and some other states, but obviously U.S. president, as part of the federal government, has no power of that. EPA does have some goals that are way beyond the next president's presidency anyway, that they have. And currently the government does have a plan to replace the entire government car fleet with electric cars, but at a pace that it will take about 13 years. So literally nothing that the next president can do is going to change any of what I just mentioned, really. So just to be clear, because I got a lot of people saying, mandate. There is no such a thing as a mandate on buying or selling electric cars currently. Okay. Now, there's also a good point to be made that just because he is for the end of the mandate, it doesn't mean that he is against electric cars. Those are not technically mutually exclusive. So I would say that I partially agree with that. All right, let me play the next clip, and this is from more recent rally. I think this was in Georgia, but don't quote me on that. So let's listen to this.
She wants to get rid of gas-powered cars and replace them with all electric. They don't go far. They cost too much. They're all made in China. Other than that, they're fantastic. And I'm for electric cars. I have to be, because Elon endorsed me very strongly, Elon.
Okay, so a few things to unpack here. So first of all, the electric cars are not all made in China. So let's just get some facts straight here, regardless of who you support. So that's just simply incorrect. Secondly, you know, I'm not, and I would like to know, for those of you who do support Trump, how do you feel about your candidate kind of changing his mind, or even publicly admitting that he has changed his mind, or took a certain position because essentially a billionaire told him to. So I'm just kind of wondering about that. But okay, so let's talk about what he actually said. That he's actually for electric cars. Now that speech does go a little bit further, and he talks about how he's only for a portion of the fleet to be electric cars, but obviously nothing is going to happen overnight. It's going to be many years, if not decades, when the entire fleet is replaced with electric cars. All right. Now the last one is actually the most interesting one, and I'm probably me and Tom will talk about it, because there's actually, he's got a good point here, and I have another video coming tomorrow about this. But listen to this.
For 8 chargers, they spent $9 billion. Is that a good deal?
Okay, so at first when I heard that, I have to say, he was like, well, this is just one of those crazy things that Trump says. Come to find out, the infrastructure bill has been passed over 2 years ago now, and there's indeed a ridiculous, I think almost $1 billion or more has been allocated to building out the chargers. Now, listen, I understand that it takes a while to build an infrastructure, and there's a lot of things goes on with it. Tom will probably speak to it more, because he knows, he works with a lot of fast charging networks and charging networks. He will tell you that it takes a while, but it's been over 2 years, and I looked it up, and it looks like they've built total so far using that money. He said 8 or 9, right? But they built 20, which is essentially nothing. And I got to tell you, for administration that pushed, this was a bipartisan bill, and for the administration that's in charge and knows they may not be in charge in another half a year, this certainly, for me, for my taste, has been, a bit of a failure. And by a little bit, I mean by a lot of a failure. Now, I know there's probably a million excuses, but at the same time, I got to tell you guys, I was surprised. I genuinely was quite surprised at only a few of them. So, and this is why I have Tom on in just a second, because he will definitely shine some light on this, because he knows a lot about this. And after that, we're going to also take your questions. And again, don't forget, please be respectful. Please only talk about things with some backup data or reasoning and stuff like that. No mud throwing whatsoever, please. Okay, all right. So it's time. Let's bring Tom in. Tom, how are you doing, my friend? We haven't done this in a while.
Hey, Alex, how's it going? Doing fine over here in New Jersey. Actually, sitting right next to, unfortunately, we can't see it the way the camera's set up, with my brand new 2024 Chevy Equinox EV. Just 2 days ago, I leased a new Equinox EV to add it to my, building fleet of electric vehicles here that I can use for long-term testing. But I'm doing well here in New Jersey. It's weather's really bad here now. We're getting 4 days of serious rain. But other than that, all's well, Alex. Good to see you.
Yeah, same, man. We haven't done this in a while, but I started doing this live streams and thought, hey, we gotta have Tom back. I mean, he's a big YouTuber now. I don't know. Maybe I had to call your agent to get you on and booked, but I'm glad you're here. Okay, so and by the way, we're gonna get back to your new acquisition. By the way, but I saw that on I think Twitter. I was like, wait, that is odd. I did not expect you to buy that one. So we'll talk about it in just a second. So all right. You've heard the clips. I'm sure you've seen these full speeches and everything. And I had to cut them out. There's a little bit more context to it. And like I said, I'm as you know, I'm not a Republican Democrat, and I kind of feel like I have a pretty sober view of the middle. And I think people like me will decide this election, right? The independents. However, for this particular topic, there's a lot to be said to, those 3 clips that Donald Trump said. So let's start with the first one, because I got so many comments for, mainly from Trump supporters saying like, yeah, we don't like mandate, and then as technically there's no such thing as a mandate, definitely not the one that a US president can get rid of on day one. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, politicians do this all the time. They take a hot button subject and they stretch the truth, to align with the narrative that they're trying to push. Yes, there's no mandate. There are certain requirements. There are certain, like you mentioned earlier, government buying a certain amount of electric vehicles or zero emission vehicles for the next 13 years to replace the fleet. There's certainly some states that have set goals, future goals. Most of them center around 2035, which is in 11 years, of saying, we're going to ban the sale of new combustion vehicles. No one's going to take away your old combustion vehicle. But honestly, those are guidelines more than anything. That the next governor that comes in could rip it up. So it was more of like trying to align, in my opinion, with what we're seeing around the world. And around the world, they are setting goals for eliminating combustion, new sales of combustion. And as you know, Alex, selling automobiles, it's a global industry. We can't be on an island, or we'll be left behind. And I think that's more of what we're seeing, is that some of the, say, more progressive states saying, Europe is saying 2035 is our goal for eliminating new combustion sales. So we're gonna agree to set that goal also. But as I said, it's a goal. The goalpost could be moved at any time if the market doesn't mature on a timeline that people thought it would.
Well, and that actually brings me to another interesting point, which again a lot of Republicans might argue against, which is what is the role of the government, right? Like the liberals usually argue that, hey, listen, the goal of the government and the really responsibility of the government is to provide the basics and protect the citizens from the basic needs, or from basic needs being taken away from them. Like, for example, it's government job to have a military and, protect us from the invasion. It's the government job to make sure that we have clean water and, certain drugs are not making it into the healthcare system, that we have seat belts in the car so we don't fly through the windshield and die at a high rate. Is providing clean air a job of a government? Because people might say it's not.
Right. Well, I mean, that's depends on what your opinion, what aisle you sit on. I think in some instances, there are people that believe in as little government as possible, and that's better than having any government intervention. But I mean, as we've clearly seen in the past, if government doesn't get involved at some level, what happens is, private industry will, let's say, pollute our rivers. They'll have factories built right along main water sources and just have sewage going right into the water stream. If there's nobody there to say, hey, you can't do that. We saw that over years in the United States. I mean, we witnessed it here in New Jersey. The Passaic River went from such a pristine river, 100 years ago, to being so polluted you couldn't even swim in it. And with the creation of the EPA under Nixon's term, that slowly changed. And over the course of the 20 years after the EPA was created, the Passaic River cleaned up massively, where to the point where it doesn't even resemble what it looked like in the early 70s. So I do think the government does play a role in helping us not go overboard. But then the point becomes, well, how far do they go? How intrusive do they get in assuring that our waterways are clean, our air is clean? And I'm not going to say, oh, here's the line, this is how far they go. I think that's up for debate, and that's constantly a push and a pull with Democrats and Republicans, with Democrats typically being on the side of saying, we need more government intervention to protect our citizens, and Republicans taking the other stance and saying that, industry should play a bigger role in deciding how far the government can, limit what they do.
Now, listen, we can pick on words and look up dictionaries and Google stuff in terms of what the mandate is. And I think a lot of people argued with me on this in the comment section, but EPA does have a goal, right? And it's not like they are like sitting around just saying, oh, we hope, right? Fingers crossed. No, this goal will require a certain amount of vehicles to be sold that meet certain standards, with the EPA and everything. So let's see, let's just call that goal slash future requirement a mandate. And also let's talk about what they also threw in there, the $7,500 point of sale credit, and for new, and also there's a smaller one for used cars. There's an argument to be made that, hey, listen, this is a capitalist country. If we have a new technology, yes, we can help it out, a little bit, as the government has. I mean, it's been quite a few years now, but at some point, what we got to kick these, training wheels off. It has to be a fair market, and let the best men win. We got hybrids, we got gas cars, we got electric cars, and on top of that, Tesla, when Tesla was setting their sales records, there was no $7,500 credit that they were qualified for at that time. As a matter of fact, when it came back, now I'm not saying there's a direct correlation there, but I'm just saying they were able to sell just fine without it and outsell everybody else, where now with it, their sales are going down, which, is for other reasons. So what do you think about, are we doing a disservice to electric cars if we're mandating and kind of helping electric cars, at this point?
So I've always believed that the incentives need to go away at a certain point. I had previously, I've been in this industry now, Alex, for 15 years. I had always said somewhere around 2025 is when we should be sunsetting the incentives, because I didn't think that they would be necessary anymore. I'm pushing that back a little bit more now to definitely by the end of this decade. I don't believe that there should be any more incentives on electric vehicles. I don't think they'll be necessary. So we're looking at 5 years or less that we don't need to have any incentives. And why do we need to have the incentives? Well, you've heard this before. It's new technology. Well, then you'll say, well, we didn't incentivize cell phones or plasma TVs or whatever when they were new technology, but there's societal benefits to the new technology of electric vehicles, of moving to zero emission vehicles, and that's why government is involved. And don't forget, the electric vehicles competing technology, combustion vehicles, the fuel for combustion vehicles is highly subsidized. Oil exploration and so forth. The big oil companies get hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of subsidies for exploration, even protection to some point, or military going into the Middle East, stabilizing unstable regimes, or that's our goal, but then we make them more unstable. But going in there and fighting wars in that area to protect and stabilize the flow of oil, all that is oil subsidies. So, if we could eliminate oil subsidies, I would say, okay, on day one, let's eliminate all electric vehicle subsidies also, because what would happen is the price of gas would go up so high that now it would make a much more compelling argument to pay a little bit more at the dealer for the electric vehicle, because the overall lifespan, the cost of the fueling it would be so much less. It might be 2 to 3 times less now. But if we removed all the oil and gas and fossil fuel subsidies, it might be 10 times less. So, if gas was, $12 a gallon, $10 a gallon, $12 a gallon, you'd be looking at a lot better return on your investment if you buy an electric car than you do today.
All right. And I'm also kind of showing some of the comments that people are submitting for the same topic. And yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, obviously it's either, equal playing field, or, the new technology, especially that achieving goals of, breathing better and less lung cancer, should kind of be, the job of the government. Now that I live in Bangkok, I got to tell you, this is the first time that, it's been a problem. As a matter of fact, I just did a, live stream last week and reposted it about, 1 year review of my life here in Thailand. And I essentially said, and as you know, and then when you visited me here, I think you also kind of saw it firsthand that, I love everything about this life except for one thing, which is pollution. and the pollution is quite brutal, which did affect my health, literally affected my health when we had the pollution season, when we had the rain, and it comes in a city, right? Climate change, no climate change, it comes from the cars because there's so many of them. There's tons of motorbikes, and none of them are clean fuel. So it is a problem, and I feel like it does need to have a solution. Of course, nobody will ever agree on where's that line, right? How much of it is government, how much of it is doing business and capitalism. So RC Robinson here also says, and I don't know I'm not saying that this is the correct number, but he says 7 million people die each year from air pollution related illnesses. Now, of course, those statistics are usually a little bit skewed because if somebody was already pretty sick and it was going to go very soon, then maybe the lung cancer that they got from the pollution pushed them over the edge. So this is probably not 100%, but it's definitely. I mean, I'm a pretty healthy guy, and I'm relatively young in terms of how far I'm from my statistical death, and I was affected by this, and probably will be next year, to the point where I've thought about either changing my lifestyle for 2 or 3 months, where let's say I don't play soccer outside and I take cycling classes indoors, or I literally go and spend 2 or 3 months either in Philippines and Bali, which is all nearby, just to avoid breathing the poison. So it really it hits home for me now, right? Now that I'm experiencing it. So Aldo does make a good point, and I have to concede that it's not like I didn't know about this before, but he said you don't need to go to Thailand to appreciate car pollution, just it is the south of Italy, and many other spots. Now we addressed the mandate, but now the second clip that I played is, and I guess let's have a little bit fun with it, because I don't think there's any kind of a solution here. But what do you think about essentially Donald Trump saying, "Hey, listen, I got to be for electric cars now"? That Elon Musk endorsed me. What are your thoughts on that?
So, those of you that have followed Trump, and I followed him way before he was a political candidate. If I live here in New Jersey. Trump's Bedminster golf course, or country club, where he spends most of his time, even while he was president, he split half his time from Bedminster, half his time down in Mar-a-Lago, and a very small percentage of his time actually in the White House. It's like 3 miles from my house in a straight line, maybe a little bit more. And he's lived in this area his whole life. And I know people that know Donald Trump. I know families that know the Trumps. My brother-in-law worked for them. So I've known him not really known him personally, but I know people, good friends, that have known Donald Trump for the last 30 years. Business people, one of the contractors that built one of my buildings when I used to do some commercial work, did a lot of concrete work for Donald Trump. So I can say this with experience over knowing the man for 30 years, not personally, but through people. Donald Trump's very transactional. And what I mean by that is, if somebody does something for him, he has to do something back. There's no that was great, thank you very much. Everything is a transaction. He feels obligated to do something if someone does something for him. And likewise, if he does something for somebody, it's not just, oh, what a nice guy. No, he expects something done back to him. And I think that's part of how this came about. Well, Elon Musk is, this big billionaire, richest guy in the world. He's going to give me, tens of millions of dollars. So I can't just continue to disparage electric vehicles. Okay, they're good now. Okay, I guess I have to, and in his own words, I guess I have to like electric cars now. So that totally wasn't a surprise to me, at least, because that's Donald Trump. He's a very transactional person. Everything is business. Everything is, you did A, now I do B.
So fair enough. And by the way, there's something to be said about that in general. And I feel like the other side does it as well. They're maybe not as honest, about it. And I'm not even using the word honest here in a positive way. Sometimes you, as a politician, you don't always want to disclose stuff like this up front or like out and about, but whatever, we know that's how, Trump is. Now let's talk about Elon Musk here, because on one hand, I want to say, hey, listen, just as far as topic of electric cars, it's obviously a good thing that Elon Musk kind of cozied up to Donald Trump, because no matter who, wins the election, technically it's going to be president who will be for electric cars, right? Trump because of Elon Musk, and Harris because they're Democrats, right? So I feel like on one hand, it was kind of a good thing for electric cars that Elon did that. On another hand, there is a poll that was done by Civic Science, that's kind of a pollster organization, and their poll showed that those people who normally vote Democrat, their interest in Tesla has fallen from, I believe, like 60% to like 20%. Again, these are rough numbers. I don't quote me a minute, but I remember it was like 1/3. Which means that, and I would say at least half of the people who buy Teslas tend to be more liberal, with already slumping sales, and Tesla is literally the only car company that sells electric cars that has their sales gone down this year. Now that Democrats, might feel that by giving Tesla money when they're purchasing Teslas, part of it goes to Elon Musk, and part of that goes to Elon Trump, the candidate they want to vote against, and a lot of them believe that he's evil and will destroy the country, right? So, I expect the Q3 to be disastrous quarter for Tesla. So, could it be that it could be good for electric cars, but bad specifically for Tesla? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm sorry, broke up just a little bit at the end. Just give me that last question over.
So basically, I'm just saying that endorsement of Donald Trump by Elon Musk could be a good thing for electric cars in general, but a very bad thing for Tesla in particular, which is the leader of the electric car industry.
Yeah. So, I might have a little bit of a different opinion on this than a lot of people, Alex, quite honestly.
That's why I have you on.
I don't think it really matters which person is elected president as far as electric cars are concerned. In the very short term, it could matter, but don't forget, if you want to say, well, the obvious answer is, it's good for electric vehicles if Harris gets elected. It might be bad for electric vehicles if Trump gets elected, because he said a lot of bad things about him. Only recently, he's had this transaction where he said, okay, I guess I got to like them now. The fact of the matter is, we went through a Trump presidency 4 years ago. It didn't slow down the sale of electric vehicles at all. It didn't do anything to, let's say, hold back the electric vehicle evolution. And it won't do it again. A Harris presidency, I don't think will speed up the transition to electric vehicles. The industry is going to do it on its own, regardless of who's president. It's a global industry. We see where this industry is going. It's a fait accompli. It's inevitable, in my opinion, that at some point in the 2030s, whether it's the mid 2030s towards the end of the 2030s, it's going to be the end of combustion. When I say the end of combustion, I mean 90+% of the vehicles are going to be fully electric, not even hybrids, by the end of next decade. And it doesn't matter. It's all white noise right now, with one presidential candidate saying that he likes them and the other one saying that they don't. It's a global industry. The automakers know this. Their product planning spans, 1 or 2 life cycles down the road. All the automakers now are planning, and they're already developing vehicles that are going to come out 3 or 4 years from now. So the vehicles that they're working on now are going to come out when the next president's in their last year of office. So it almost doesn't matter. I've sat in on meetings with the automakers here, U.S. automakers, where high-level people in the company discussed this and said, look, we don't make plans on the next president, because by the time our product actually hits the market, the president that just got elected will be off. They don't make electric vehicles in 2 years or gas vehicles in 2 years, Alex. They have, 3 to 4 years of R&D and design. I mean, look when Tesla started working on the Cybertruck compared to when it actually the tires hit the pavement. So to me, it's all white noise with one president saying they're for him, one president saying against him. Yes, let's say Trump is elected, and let's say he takes a hard anti-electric vehicle stance and does what he can to limit the EPA's influence. I mean, there was discussions of abolishing the EPA entirely if Trump gets elected, trying to walk back the incentives, okay, all that. That will hurt short-term electric vehicle sales. Let's say somehow they were able to, in the first year of a second term for Trump, eliminate all the incentives. Let's say they could do that, which I don't think they can. I think it would take years if they could even undo that. But let's say they were able to.
Well, so hold on a second. So
yeah.
I believe that, yes, to cancel out a bill, you have to have another bill, right? And for that, you need to have both houses and some time and all that stuff. However, the president and administration can essentially take the money that was allocated for something. Like, for example, Donald Trump said he would take the money that's allocated for, let's say, the infrastructure and reallocate it to building more roads, bridges, and so forth, which is within his power or his administration's power. So I just want to mention that.
So, yeah, don't forget, Alex, a huge swaths of that money has already been allocated. You can't take it back from companies that have signed agreements. And I know you mentioned before only, let's say, 20 sites have been turned on, but there's hundreds of them that are in the process, that are, they broke ground, they're having permits. And yes, going back to that topic, I work intimately with some of the infrastructure companies. It takes a long time to get a site between, site location to approvals, utility interconnection, and then turning the key. There's a supercharger station that's been installed and ready to open not far from where I live. And it's been sitting that way for a year, but it can't open because of some type of a problem with either the utility or permitting. And this happens all over. So it takes a while to get these things online. So let's say he's able to do that. And I don't even know for a fact that what you're saying is 100% true, that when he gets elected, he can just say, okay, all that money that was going for EV charging, I'm going to put it into bridges. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. Let's say he could. A tremendous amount of that money has already been allocated. He can't take it from the companies that have signed contracts that are installing the chargers. And even if they did, private enterprise is going to pick up on that. I mean, you look at what Tesla's done without much public money with the supercharger network. We have this new company called Iona that's coming here in the U.S. that I'm actually going to be interviewing some of their principals soon for State of Charge. They seem to have their act together and want to be a force in North America as far as a charging network. They seem to have learned from some of the mistakes that some of the other networks have had. So we're going to get the charging, whether or not it's funded by the U.S. or private enterprise out. It's going to come. I just, like I said, I think it's white noise. I don't think, and there's nothing that if Trump were to take a hard line against electric vehicles, if he gets elected and on day one he goes, this is going to be my focus, I'm going to kill electric vehicles. I'm not saying he's going to say that, but let's say he were to say that. I'm going to repeal every, pro-electric vehicle legislation we have. It's not going to make a difference. This is a global industry. The industry is moving towards electric vehicles. You know what it's going to make a difference in, Alice? It's going to hurt the U.S. car companies because they would, let's say, be given a little bit of a breather to, let's say, not focus on EVs over the next 3 or 4 years. And what's going to happen is that's going to put GM and Ford in an even worse position. In my opinion, the best thing that can happen to GM and Ford here in the U.S. would be to keep the pressure on them to develop strong electric vehicle programs, because if they don't, they're going to get swallowed up by this industry. In 10 or 15 years, they're going to be small niche players that have lost an enormous percentage of their market share because the Korean car manufacturers are going full bore. China's going full bore. We're not going to be able to keep China out of the U.S. We could put tariffs. We could do a whole lot of things. One way or another, they're getting in here with their low cost, high quality electric vehicles. Europe's doing a better job with they're putting out more and more electric vehicles, the European car makers. So here's if we want to lose auto manufacturing here in the US, then okay, focus on combustion, and all the other companies in the next decade will just eat your lunch.
All right. You just covered three huge topics. Let me back up a little as I took a little notes here. So first of all, in terms of saying which administration is better, and going to support more electric cars. So it's weird. I just had a conversation with my date. Actually, my date. I just wanted to make sure she got home okay. She did. Okay, yeah. So I was just talking to her, and she's obviously Thai, and I said, we were talking about, because today was a big news because the party that won the election here was just dissolved by the Supreme Court here in Thailand, and I was just telling her that be careful what you wish for, because I said, listen, you guys have a lot of things that we in America don't have: free healthcare, pretty much non-existent crime. Well-sourced food that hasn't been like monopolized by one company. There's a lot of things you guys have, and if you're gonna start moving into that direction, you be prepared to become American. I don't mean it in a good way, but I also pointed out, and this is to your point, is that since I came to America, I went through, and it's been more than 30 years, right? I went through Bush, Clinton, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden. And if I think about, generally speaking, has anything changed for an average American in America throughout those many different presidents, and as opposite as they were? I mean, Obama and Trump, probably the most opposite presidents back to back, right? Just in terms of like the most basic, human life needs, the healthcare, the crime, all of that other stuff. And I think the answer is no. The answer is no. Yeah, we did a lot of things about stuff that doesn't really affect a lot of people. I mean, you may feel, strongly about abortion, for example, but at the end of the day, it is probably not a topic that you're going to need to really worry it's going to affect your life, right? Versus, let's say, healthcare or crime. So, and I'm thinking like, well, if none of these presidents throughout all these decades were able to really affect the most important parts of American lives, are they really going to affect their lives as far as whether or not they're driving an electric car sooner rather than later? So that's to your first point. The second point, and I was actually going to ask you this a little bit later about the mandates, and just generally speaking about what the government can and cannot do. I mean, in California, there is technically a mandate, right? Because essentially the standards for cars, specifically also electric cars, that California sets, even though it's just one state, but because it's such a huge market, not only many other states adopted, but essentially when cars, get imported or made for the U.S. market, a lot of times, these automakers go like, okay, we'll just make them for California, because if we make them for California, we can sell them in all 50 states. So it's something that's to be said that, California does have technically a mandate or a goal, as you say, and that's not something that is in the power of a U.S. president, no matter who he or she is, and that's the mandate that everybody has to abide by, which is California. That cannot be changed no matter what. And lastly, and I guess this is what I want to ask you, is that, a lot of people said this, and I don't necessarily disagree, is that, okay, you can be for electric cars, but to be against mandates. Now my answer to that is, yes, but usually when people are for electric cars, they're also for mandates. For example, like, I don't like pizza. But if I was to tell you that I love Pizza Hut, the restaurant, you'll be like, oh, that's a little weird. I mean, yes, there's a possibility that I'm just might love their breadsticks and just go there for that. But usually people who love pizza, they love Pizza Hut. People who don't like pizza, they don't go to Pizza Hut. So people who usually don't support electric car mandates, usually not exactly pro-electric cars. Do you think those are mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying there. Um, uh, I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, but I agree along the lines of that. But one of the things I learned here is that you don't like pizza. I can't even believe we're friends if you don't like pizza. But I
No,
digress.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry. My family didn't have enough money to have
I
pizza. As a matter of fact, I don't even think we had pizza or
pizza
pizza Hut in
is a
Russia
low
when I
cost
was growing
option.
up.
Well, are you kidding me? Pizza was like for poor people. You could buy a
In
large
America,
pie.
for American poor people, not in Russian. Like we did
You
not
could
have.
feed a
I've
family of
never had a
4 for like
hamburger.
$10.
No, that is no. The thing is, pizza wasn't a type of food that
Yeah.
you would have. Like, for example, the first time I tried a hamburger is when McDonald's came to Russia, and they were the first ones pretty much to serve this weird thing where there's a bread and there's another bread and there's patty. Like it's crazy. Or French fries, for example. So no, I didn't even get to have a chance to like pizza. But I do have to say that I did have pizza yesterday because it was a buffet, and I was like, all right, I mean it's cheese and it's bread, so I might as well have it as a side dish. But yeah, but go on. I didn't know that my pizza reference was a trigger for you, but I understand.
Yeah. No, I generally agree with what you said before. I'm not. I don't need to expand much on it as far as it being mutually exclusive. I kind of tend to agree with you.
Okay, so and I just saw a comment here because BYD Thailand. I think you saw what's happening here with BYD, where and I told you when I got here a little over a year ago, the few electric cars that I saw were mainly Teslas, right? Now, not only we have way more electric cars, like a majority of them is BYD. And they are already selling more models here than Tesla. They're already cheaper and more popular and so forth. And then we have tons of other electric cars here from China. But here's the thing. It's I saw Pete Buttigieg talk about it, and at first I was like, I don't agree there with Pete. But then I was like, you know what? He might have a point. He basically says that the competition is a little weird, for electric cars, because electric car makers that are from America and Europe, they are having to compete in a capitalist society, right? Where Chinese automakers kind of competing in more of a communist society because the government is behind them, right? The incentives in many different ways, the tax subsidies, and just overall, when a Chinese government backs something up, it's going to happen in a big way, right? So when the Chinese government is giving so much power and money and freedom to the electric car makers in China, and they have and then the European and American companies have to compete. It's kind of an unfair competition, but life's not fair. And if we don't want to lose this, and if America doesn't want to lose this to China, the government is better actually step in, if anything, help electric cars rather than just lose this to China. And I think we are. I mean, America's been losing a lot to China, and you don't want such a big industry as transportation to also lose to China. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as you know, you and I have been in China at the same time. Together, I've been to China quite a few times. What China's doing is really remarkable right now with cars. For years, nobody would buy Chinese cars because they were such low quality. All the vehicles in China, not all the vehicles, there were Chinese car companies, but they were garbage. The majority of the vehicles there were partnerships with established brands where, European companies and American companies and Japanese companies would go to China, form a partnership. Well, they had to. They couldn't just sell their cars their own. China government forced them to have a partnership with a local Chinese company and make cars there. And it was the only way that they had good quality vehicles. Now it's a different story, because what they decided was basically we're never going to be able to build combustion engines and transmissions well on our own, but we can do this electric thing. It's electric vehicles are a lot less complicated. They're software defined. You don't have to develop super complicated motors and engines, which they were transmissions. They were never good at. They could copy things, but they just could never make their own good motors and engines. But they could with electric vehicles. So, at some point 10, 12 years ago, the Chinese government said, okay, we're going to be major players in automobiles, even though we're not now. And this is how we're going to do it. The path forward is electric vehicles. We don't know if they're going to be here in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but the entire industry is going to be electric. So we're going to start investing in it now. We're going to subsidize companies. We're going to give companies, free land to build factories. We'll even give them the money to build the factories because we want to be a powerhouse in the automobile industry. And they've done that. And we're seeing the fruits of their investment now. And Chinese cars, I can't believe how good the quality that they are. I've driven them. I've been over to China. I've seen them in Europe and other countries. They're now on par with the established brands, even the premium brands. And that's scary because they're able to build them for less, as you said, because they get subsidies. The government backs them. They don't have to worry about funding half the time. They need money. Okay, how much money do you need? You want to build a factory? You want to build 2 factories? Okay, we'll float it at a real low interest rate and give you the land to put the factory on. Give you a 100-year lease on a plot of land on 500 acres or whatever. So it's tough for other brands, regardless of where they're from, to compete with that. So we need to have some sort of a balance, some sort of free trade. I'm not for just allowing China to come here and dump all their products, not just cars, all their cars here, all their products here. There should be some sort of a fair balance with that. But the devil's always in the details. The Biden administration now just increased the tariffs to 100% on the cars. Basically, you can't import cars from China here now because even though they make them less expensive, they're not half as expensive where they can do 100% tax. But that's just a Band-Aid. That's just trying to say, okay, we don't know how to deal with this, so we're going to stop it right now. Now, we've already heard that some Chinese companies are going to maybe build factories in Mexico or Canada or, even in the U.S. to get around this.
Thailand,
yeah. So there's countries that we have free trade agreements with and so forth. So they're gonna get here, is what I'm saying. I know they're gonna get here. So we need, whether it's a Trump administration or a Harris administration, we need to have some sort of a plan for how we're gonna deal with this to make it fair. I don't pretend to have the answers, Alex. I don't know what it is. Is it a 20% tax? I don't know. But I do think we need to somehow make it fair because it's not fair for the Chinese companies to be able to come into Europe and the US right now and sell a car, at 50% the cost or 75% the cost that a US manufacturer can make it and sell it for because the government's subsidizing the rest of that. So we have to come up with a comprehensive plan. I don't know if we're gonna, because let's face it, our government is just dysfunctional now. If the Republicans came up with a great plan, the Democrats would stop them from doing it. The same way that the Republicans stopped the Democrats from doing things. The Biden administration had a plan, a border security plan this last year. Even many Republicans backed it, but it wasn't allowed to get passed through because the Republicans can't give the Democrats a win the same way the Democrats won't give the Republicans a win. So am I hopeful that we're going to actually solve this? No, I'm not, because we're in this stalemate now, this dysfunctional stalemate with our government isn't working for us anymore. It's only working for the party's best interest. But we need to come up with something. We need to figure out how to deal with this, or the Fords, the GMs, they're going to go out of business. They're going to get overwhelmed with low-cost electric vehicles that are going to flood our shores over the course of the next 15 years.
But here's my problem with this. Okay, just to play devil's advocate, I don't 100% agree with what I'm just about to say, but just to play as devil's advocate, I mean, where do we draw a line? Because we have no problems, wearing clothes that is made in China that's much cheaper, and those clothing companies in China that imported this in America drove a lot of American companies out of business. Same thing with many other products, including electronics and everything else, we accepted that stuff from China is going to be more affordable, and that's going to be good for the American consumer, even though despite that, a lot of American companies are going to go out of business. There's going to be less taxes paid. There's going to be less jobs, right? How are cars that much different? Because essentially, if you just think about consumers, you can argue that, listen, I don't care who these companies are, where this coming from. I want the most affordable, car, and the best bang for that buck, right? I don't care. Just like people don't care where their clothes comes from. Why do we need to care about where the cars come from? What would you say to that?
They're not different. It's a manufacturing job was no less valuable than a job making power tools or sheetrock or clothing that we've seeded many years ago. But just because we've perhaps mishandled this in the past doesn't mean that we need to continue to mishandle it. At some point, there'll be nothing left if we're allowed to continue to have unfair trade. We got in the 70s, really in the 80s, we got drunk off of cheap, low cost imports. We were consumer crazy because we could buy so much stuff that was so much less than what we would have paid if it was all manufactured here. And it doesn't even have to be so much less. If it was $1 less, it was $1 in my pocket, so I'm going to buy that shirt because it's $1 less. But at some point, if we lose the entire manufacturing sector, where are we? So I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we don't lose that.
And here's a good point that Sebastian makes, because he basically says that in America we have 4-year plans, right, with one administration, and then when that is kind of separated into 2-year plans because of our Congress changing every 2 years, where China does have a luxury of having a 15-year plan because it's going to be the same government in 15 years, and people have to compete with that as well. So and like I said, I'm seeing it the firsthand. Now I do want to mention, and this is kind of a bit of a rant, a continuation of my rant from my previous live stream, is that here in Thailand, they sure have a great America first or Thailand first policies that do not allow for this type of stuff. For example, when you hire a foreigner here, you have to hire 4 Thai people to 1 foreigner in order to run a company, right? Here, a foreigner cannot own land, which is crazy to me that in America we allowed other people from other countries and other companies from other countries to own land when China owns a big part of United States, like literally the land. So we do. I mean, I am, like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter because I'm independent, but I do like this American first thing, which, by the way, that infrastructure bill was very much, if Democrats had any PR brains, right, they would have named that bill America First, because that bill is designed to bring the manufacturing and the jobs in the car segment, battery making, manufacturing of actual cars, to the United States, because that way they would be qualified for $7,500 a credit. So to me, that was a really, really big deal that we really should have, we really at some point should have changed. But let me bring up the point where we're talking about, which is, Kevin said that the lack of charging infrastructure for such a large investment is shameful. Biden administration going with anyone but Tesla for charging was a huge mistake. Stupid. Okay, now I disagree with the fact that administration can favor one company over the other. They can't. They can only generally distribute this fairly. But at the end of the day, so I think it would be stupid for government to favor one company. Kevin, come on. I mean, will get us in trouble and has gotten us in trouble before. But Tom, what are your thoughts about this? Because I got to tell you, like, I understand, you know more about this than me, that it takes a while to build out infrastructure and build this. But come on, man, over 2 years with almost $1 billion distributed all over the place, and there were no, fast track policies, implemented. For example, the government could have said, hey, California, if I'm going to get some money, give you some money with the companies that do business in California and building out this infrastructure, you need to speed up your permit releasing process, and stuff like that. Just common sense. And yet it didn't happen. 20 freaking chargers in 2 years, to me, is unacceptable. Where am I thinking wrong here?
Well, first of all, it's not like 2 years ago when it was signed, Alex, all of the companies that were going to install them, were ready to install them. It took the better part of the first year just for companies to bid on projects and be awarded them. So it's not like it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years since it was passed. But then, there was a vetting process. Companies had to put proposals together. Companies formed that weren't even there that said, okay, we're going to be an infrastructure company now. So it took them a couple of months to get principals together, hire people and everyone, and then write out proposals, submit the proposals. They had to be vetted. Am I happy that we don't have more in 2 years? Of course not. And I understand why people are frustrated, but it's not like 2 years ago, everyone got shovels in the ground. The first maybe 6 months to a year was like bids, people putting out bids, the government awarding contracts. And now you have to deal with utilities. It's not, you said, oh, the state of California. Okay. They can push their individual municipalities to review permitting fast. But then how about the other end? The other end is the utilities, the interconnects. A lot of these sites had to go in areas, Alex, where they didn't have enough power, and the utilities can't snap their fingers and all of a sudden install transformers and run wires. Don't forget, 2 years ago, we were still recovering from the supply chain disruptions. And I know for a fact there were companies like Electrify America, EVgo, infrastructure companies that were ordering transformers to install electric DC fast charging sites. And the manufacturers from the transformers were saying, you won't get these transformers for a year, even if you pay us in full now, because components to make the transformers were just not available because of the supply chain disruption we had. So, I was actually involved in a project with my house. You remember when I upgraded my garage here, the state of charge garage? My house had 150 amp service, and I upped it to 400 amps so I could put high powered chargers and everything. My utility told me it's going to be 6 months before they can send me a 400 amp service disconnect and meter. But I got a couple people involved that I know here in the state and said, look, I need to get this done faster. And one showed up a little bit quicker than it would have if I was just John Q customer. And that was just for a residential 400 amp panel. So there's a lot of pieces to this, Alex. It's easy for everybody to throw their hands up in the air and say, government sucks. We allocated billions of dollars and we have, 8 chargers, like Trump said, eight sites. I mean, that's all bullshit talking points, if you ask me. If you want to be reasonable about it, dive into it a little bit, spend a little time to understand what's going on here.
I think we lost Tom. Okay, I'm gonna take over for a second until we get Tom back, and Tom, we lost you. Sorry, right.
Sorry about that, Alex. There's storms going on here in my area, and we're having intermittent power and
that's okay, Tom. I understand
internet.
You live in a developing country. I mean, that's okay. Thank God, my internet here in Thailand is 500 up, 500 down. Hasn't been down for over a year now, so don't worry about it.
We had 80-mile-an-hour winds yesterday here.
It's probably it's probably those the government regulations thing that they and unless you want to finish your point though, but I think I understand where you're going.
Really quick. It takes long to do this. It's not, and if we're going to criticize it, Alex, let's find out why it was delayed. Don't just say, oh, it's been 2 years and we have 8 stations. Okay, find out why. If there was ineptness, call it out. But if everyone's moving as fast as they can, it just takes a while. You really can't complain about it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like but this okay, here's the thing. Let me be very clear. I understand, but at the same time, this reminds me of my Tinder dating app conversations. I start talking to a girl and then she disappears, and I'm like, you'll reappear, 2 days later and start talking. I'm like, whoa, where were you? Like, you just ghosted me. And she was like, no, I just got, I was like, no. You knew I replied to your message, so you knew that you were supposed to reply. And I was like, here's the thing, government, and my point, to translate the Tinder into government analogy here, like when they passed this bill, they knew how their own freaking government works, right? They also know that they may not be in power for more than 2 years from then, right? So knowing that the government is slow and it takes some time, they should have put a lot of policies in place. And I just thought of one because I'm a genius or something. That, hey, if you're going to be allocating this to a certain, whether cities or government or states, you have to require that these states will, fast track these policies, their processes, make exceptions, and so forth and so forth. The bidding policies, how long it takes to bid and submit we kind of got all of this stuff done during COVID. Remember when COVID hit, everything also, FDA approval wasn't that necessarily, and you can apply for the, benefits and grants all of a sudden like this, right? So we are able to essentially recognize that things need to be done faster and implement some policies and shorten some processes. So to me, it's like, I understand, but this bill should have thought of all of this as part of the implementation process. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, quick response to that. Yes, we could go faster if everybody was on the same page. But as I mentioned earlier, the government is polarized. It's us against them. Doesn't matter what side you're on. The infrastructure bill was a win for the Democrats. So the Republicans would not do anything to help that process expedite, would not do anything to make the infrastructure bill successful, so that now 2 years later, the Democrats could say, look, we have 500 sites in the ground. They love the fact that their candidate could stand in front of the government and say erroneously, there's only 8 sites up. And I'm not picking on Republicans here. The Democrats would do the same thing. So that's part of it, Alex. When COVID hit, it was all hands on deck. There wasn't Republicans fighting Democrats. Everybody wanted to solve this so we could move forward with the country and open everything back up. And then you get shit done. But when you have the political polarization that we have now, and the one side can't give the other side a win, the other side is not going to do anything to help make it move forward. It's easy for you to complain about it and us to complain about it. But the fact of the matter is, that's what we have here. It's a shit show in Washington, and we don't get anything done because one side doesn't want the other side to ever get a win. So they'll do what they can to harm it. And I'm certain that's part of the reason why we don't have more sites in operational now.
And so, by the way, before I talk about bring up the last topic, which I know you're going to love, here's the thing. At the very least, like when I researched this topic, I went in to confirm that there is indeed only 20 chargers, right? And there's, government websites dedicated to this infrastructure bill where they're trying to keep track of what's happening. And I freaking couldn't find I had to rely on sort of like other journalists to analyze it and write it out in an article. That's what I had to rely on, where I kind of like to, double check myself, and I couldn't, that there is no government side that says, listen, here's all the chargers that are budgeted for. This is how much it is per one. So Trump cannot do calculations of like, well, billion spent, 20 chargers built. Let's divide it and get a ridiculous number per charger, right? There's no such number there. There's no number of saying, okay, well, it's 20 chargers right now, but we have, 100 more coming next month and 200 more coming out, and this is what the goal is by the end of the year, right? None of that. And, it's always been kind of my problem with, I think generally liberals when it comes to this type of stuff or global warming and that stuff like that. They're really bad at PR. Stuff that actually can be easily explained and even bragged about. Somehow they just refuse to have an organized charge to show to people that they've actually done something good. So that's my only comment. But let me move on to the last topic. And unless we have some super chats, by the way, guys, feel free. Last time I got almost $100 in super chats, but today, yes, we're not working hard enough. But you're gonna like this topic because this is a comment from Joker MP1. I think he participates in every live stream, so I appreciate it, even though we don't always see eye to eye. He says the big three do not want to make budget-friendly cars. And I know if one person is going to disagree besides me is you, Tom, because out of all of your electric cars, the most recent ones are both from the big three and are very budget friendly. As a matter of fact, and I hope I'm not giving anything away, one of them you bought because you just couldn't pass by on such a cheap deal for a brand new electric car with a great range. So let me know if I'm right about this, and please tell Joker MP3 how you disagree with them simply by your recent purchases.
Well, one thing I will disagree with right off the bat, there's no big three anymore. And if there's a big three in the U.S., it's GM, Ford, and Tesla. Dodge,
let's,
Chrysler.
For the sake of the argument, assume that he means the GM.
He means Dodge, Chrysler, GM, and Ford. I know, but they're owned by Stellantis, which is a foreign brand. They've pared down all their offerings, so there really is no big three in the U.S. anymore. It's big two. It's Ford and GM, and so put that to the side. So yeah, my last two EV purchases were a Chevy Bolt EV, which I got last year, and that was really the most affordable long-range electric vehicle available at the time. And now just this week I got Chevy Equinox, which is a little bit less affordable. I wish they were able to do a little bit of a better job on the pricing, but I understand, it's expensive. They need to make a profit. And GM's not offering the lowest trim, which is the 1LT yet, which is going to be the least expensive version of the Equinox. I think it's going to start $32,999. Somebody will probably correct me. I might be $33,999, somewhere in that range. So the low 30s. But we need $20,000, $25,000 electric vehicles. And that's why the $7,500 federal tax credit helps so much, because it gets some of the lowest cost vehicles, like let's say the Equinox, down into the 20s, which we have to have in order to have really mass electric vehicle adoption. We need affordable electric vehicles. So I leased a new Equinox. I got a 2RS, which is the higher trim. There's some pretty good incentives. GM had some good incentives also that I was able to stack on top of the federal tax credit and get a 2-year lease. I only really needed a 2-year lease on it because it's really mostly for reviewing and videos and so forth, for $7,000 all in. I made a one-time upfront payment of $7,000, and that's it. That's tax, everything included, and I have the vehicle for 2 years, and I really have barely driven it. I think I put 80 miles on it so far. It's sitting right next to me here in the garage, and over the weekend I plan to do some review, make some videos with it.
That is insane how cheap you got it. And and this is just one of many examples nowadays that you do get pretty affordable, cheap cars. And this is before the incentives, even in some cases, though you do live in a state that offers some amazing incentives. Though I do have to disagree with this whole we need a $20,000 electric car. I don't know where that's coming from, because as far as I'm concerned, here's the reality. The average car in America, I mean, any car in America, is now pretty much $50,000, right? So, to ask for a $20,000 car, which is way less than half of an average, in addition to which you don't have to spend money on gas, oil changes, tune-ups, transmission flashes, and many other things, that's kind of like, listen, if you want a $20,000 electric car, you can absolutely buy one right now, used. If you want a brand new car, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to work a little harder, make a little bit more money. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand where this whole we need the $20,000, electric car comes from, where you can't even really buy that many, if any, $20,000 gas cars anymore. So
yes, you can. You're wrong there, Alex. There are plenty of gas cars in the $20,000 range. Plenty
under 20,000.
No, not under 20,000.
Okay,
I'm
but you're
talking
saying
20 to 30,000. And I'm not saying you have to buy it for $20,000. I'm saying in the 20s, between $20,000 and $30,000. You mentioned the average cost of a new car, and you're right. It's close to 50,000, like 48,000, something like that in the U.S. But that's the average. That means there are plenty of cars, or half the cars are under that, and many of them are in the 20s. And take for instance the Equinox. Look up what the I don't have time to look it up right now, but the gas version of this vehicle that I have here, the gas version, the starting price is like $8,000 less. So it's in the 20s. It might be like $25,000 or $26,000. That's what we need. The Bolt was in that wheelhouse. The Bolt started at $26,000. And that's what I think we need more of those cars. And, you just saying, make more money or buying a used car, I think is talking down to the average American. I don't think that's appropriate, to be honest with you.
No. Hold on a second. I've heard this argument before. I'm not talking down to an average American. I'm talking down to an average American who wants to get a lot of shit for very little money. That's my problem. So the average American doesn't demand and says that they need a $20,000 brand new electric car. I don't think that's what an average American says. But listen, I also need a six-pack. My dating life would be much better. But the reality is, the 50-year-old dude is just not going to get one, really. You know what I mean? So, listen, I don't think, this is not one of those topics that I want to convince you or anybody else. I honestly, as you know, many times when we talk, I just want to present the other side of the story. So if you don't mind, let's move on to a couple of things, because somebody did throw some money at me, hopefully for the six-pack plastic surgery. Jared the Geek, which, by the way, has been participating in Jesus, now people throwing a lot of it. So, okay, we'll get back to Rob in a second, Rob has been I think he super chatted last time like $80. But anyway, so Jared the Geek super chat. He says EVs are less complex, batteries are keeping prices high. That will come down and get us lower prices. Thank you, Jared, for $5. Tom, do you agree?
Yeah, batteries prices have been coming down. I don't know. They're not going to continue to go down at the rate that they had, because we're kind of like, over the course of the last 15 years, I started driving EVs in 2009, the batteries dropped dramatically. I mean, they were like, when I first started driving, there were 10 times, batteries were, I believe, between 8 and 10 times more expensive than they are today. So we've gotten that initial really crunch down with volume, with competition, with other suppliers. But now we're going to see a much slower reduction in the cost. So, in the next 10 years, batteries aren't going to drop, 80% like they did in the last 10 years. Volume is going to help and competition is going to help. But, I think battery electric vehicles will remain higher than comparable combustion vehicles for a while now, for at least a decade. Even if it's not that much higher, I think they're going to be higher well into the 30s.
Yeah, but people also forgetting that when you're driving a car with a battery, you don't have to spend a lot of money on gas. So essentially that does offset each other with time.
It's not that, one second, let me just quickly, it's not necessarily that they're forgetting, but you're right, they are forgetting. It's also a fact of the fact that, when they look at that cost at the dealership, they can't mentally also average in the cost of fuel. The dealership should be doing that for them. But they can't. They look at, that car's $5,000 more than this car. They can't figure out, in 5 years, I'm going to save $5,000 in fuel. So it's actually the same price. They just look at what's my monthly payment. They take the fueling cost out of it, which dealerships have to do a better job of packaging that together and say, look, how long do you plan on owning this car? 5 years? Okay, this is what your total cost of ownership should be in 5 years on this vehicle and this vehicle. But they're not incentivized to do that, dealerships. They don't care if you buy the gas car or the electric car. So they just want you to sell you a car. So it's easier for them to sell the gas cars.
Fair enough. Thank you, Rob, for $20. All of a sudden, at the end of the live stream, everybody wants to give me money. I don't mind. There's never a bad time. Because I'm using a software to stream on multiple platforms, it is like a kind of a character that YouTube, this was through YouTube, that comes through, but now it literally describes it. It says pair character dancing under a rain of confetti and taking a hand off saying you're amazing. So if you look at if you're watching a YouTube,
I didn't know what the hell was going on here.
I know that every time I'm like, wait, what does this mean? Because I just read the comment, right? So thank you so much, Rob. You guys feel
And
free.
wait one sec, Alex. Rob, you are amazing. Were you talking to me or Alex?
It's a good point, Rob. We want a clarification. We absolutely want clarification. And let's see. Jared the Geek, the previous super chatter, said the total cost of ownership is very important. I went from a 14 miles per gallon car in North California to an EV that cost me $40 a month in fuel. And that's what I'm saying. People kind of, take it for granted. I said they forget about it, but I guess taken for granted would be the right thing to say. Now, the comment. All right, I'm not even going to say that. Actually, the issue is the range, says an X-rated username. No, the issue is not the range. I'm sorry. The issue is just not the range. I'll tell you, the issue is that people are slow to understand the new technology, and they think that the range is a problem, but they don't understand that, the way you refuel an electric car is very different, which is, overnight. So it's only how many miles do you really need to drive per one day versus how many miles do you need to drive, until you go to the gas station next week. Granted, the long distance trips are a different story, but they're extremely rare. And a lot of households nowadays who own an electric car still own a gas car, or they rent a car to go further. But we do have a pretty good infrastructure pretty much on all three continents, North America, Europe, and here in Asia, and specifically in China, where you can pretty much get anywhere, with fast charging, which will take a little extra time, but you will absolutely can get there. Now, Tom, if you don't mind, I'm gonna maybe I'm gonna reply to a comment that's towards you, but I'm gonna just take it upon myself to reply to it myself, if you don't mind. David says, Tom, stop blaming two sides. By the way, sides is spelled with a D and not T. But also, I honestly, I listened to Tom very carefully, since I'm here specifically to host him. But I don't think he blamed either side. But let me read you the comment and let me learn you something here. I don't remember Democrats, he says, sabotaging Republican bills after they passed. There is no it is on both sides. David, and I'm going to tell you with with love, okay, as an independent. I got to tell you, as an independent who's now actually doesn't even live in America, I live in Thailand now, I can tell you that my view and a lot of people's views who are independent, and essentially people like us will decide pretty much every election, is that both sides are equally bad by how negatively they're affecting the country, just in different ways. For example, a lot of people would argue that the Republicans are trying to end democracy and the Democrats are trying to end culture. You know what I mean? And honestly, I'm going to agree with that. So it's actually the shit stings on both sides. They're just different kinds of shit. So you have to understand, like, if you love democracy and think this is the most important thing, then yeah, you're probably going to side with Democrats. But if you think culture, is the most important thing, you probably are going to start, side with the Republicans. And there is no right answer. It really is for what your priorities are in life. But one thing we do need to end, actually, you guys do need to end in that country if you want anything to come back to where people still talk to each other, and whether on the street or in Congress, is that you need to stop thinking the other side is evil and wants children to die and the country to go to hell, okay? You really need to understand that the other side also thinks that you're wrong. And if anything, you don't have to agree with the other side, but you do need to understand where they're coming from. Other than that, this country is going to hell, because this is where it's going when people are not even willing to understand and be empathetic to the other side. But as an outsider looking in and an independent, I got to tell you, both piles of shit are so bad that I left the country after living there for 30 years. So please think about that. Tom, unless you want to get in on this, let's move on to maybe last topic that we have here.
Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's why I wanted to kind of take it. All right. Well, we just why don't we circle back to this comment from Sebastian? He says, ranch has never been an issue. That's not true. The range has been an issue, but it hasn't been an issue for a while for those of us who've driven electric cars for a while and realize that, hey, I drive 40 miles a day, 50 miles a day. Any car with over 100 miles of range is good enough for daily driving. And when I do go on long distance, this is how it works, whether it's a Tesla supercharger or, whatever fast charging network you use. It's going to be a little uncomfortable in some cases, but you will get to your a destination. And there was another, RC Robinson says range anxiety was a term created by the GM marketing team because that is what they had with the lead ICE GM EV1. I'm not even sure if it's true. You're much more of an OG on this one than me, Tom. So I don't know if that's true, but where are we at with the range anxiety?
Well, RC is pretty much correct. That's when we first started hearing about range anxiety, back when the EV1 came out. And of course, the original version of it had the lead acid batteries, barely went 100 miles. And there was, range anxiety with that. I agree. I agree. In a lot of the early EVs, you had range anxiety. Don't forget, I was driving full-time an EV in 2009. I've been driving EV since then. In my first EV only went about 100 miles. So I had a 50-mile leash. There were no public chargers anywhere. I mean, there were sockets, 120-volt sockets I could plug in if I really had to. But you had anxiety with that because you were super limited. There were no charging stations to navigate to at the time. There wasn't a single public charging station in the entire state of New Jersey. So yeah, it was a thing. But for now, I mean, the average electric vehicle now, I think sold in North America, goes more than 250 miles per charge. I think that's like the median range, 260 or 270, something like that. And very few people, if they have the ability to charge at home, that's a big if. That's not a problem now. With 270, 260, 300 miles of range, very few people drive more than 150 miles in one direction, need to get back home without plugging in. The biggest thing that I call it now is it's charge anxiety. It's not range anxiety. Are there chargers where you're going to go? Are they high-speed chargers? Do they work? Are they not filled up? Oh, wow, I'm not even reading this comment. I don't have range anxiety, but more charger anxiety. So
Great
yeah,
minds.
yeah. And I didn't see that comment. This is true. This is where I think we had range anxiety 10, 12 years ago. We have now, that's evolved to charge anxiety. And the only way to solve that is to have, ubiquitous DC fast charging stations that are reliable, that have enough plugs at every site, not two chargers, when there's 5 EVs waiting to plug in. And then you have Electrify America sites where they might have 6 chargers, but 3 of them are broken. We need to get beyond that. We need to have, a dozen or more chargers at every DC fast charge location, and they all have to be working. And once we get to that, I think the charge anxiety is going to go away. And then, it'll just be normal. But we need a lot more plugs, both DC and AC. We need public AC plugs for people that live in apartment buildings, street side charging, workplace charging, airport charging. There's a ton of things that we need to do to get to the point where that, let's say, anxiety goes away.
Fair enough. And, like I said, I think it's also that topic or issue is still separated, between current EV owners who kind of know how to go about it. Now they're also separated into those who live at home and can charge at home, have dedicated chargers, and those who don't, which becomes a bigger problem. But the other bigger half is the people who are kind of newbies or people who are shopping for an electric car and they just don't know how it feels yet, because you really have to just drive an electric car and see that, when you come home, most of the battery is still there. When I lived in Las Vegas, which is, I would say, an average city in terms of driving distance, I think everything was within about 20 miles if you've ever been to Vegas, right? And I had, which I still consider one of the best plug-in hybrid in my Chevy Volt. And I've never met, by the way, a Chevy Volt driver that was not deeply in love with a Chevy Volt. I only had to gas my Chevy Volt only once a month, because essentially I would go somewhere and it was enough for whatever 40 miles of realistic range. I would come home, if I really drove a lot, recharge and go, out at night in the evening, and it would be more than enough. So I would say 40-mile, range is probably enough for most people for daily charging. So that's where that I would kind of add to that. So, all right, Tom. Well, the big question that we had when we started was what Trump versus Harris, who's better for EVs? And let me know if you agree with my answer at the end of the day. And neither and both. We probably won't see that much of a difference, even though we'll never know what would have been if the other person was a president. We're probably not going to have the course of electric cars, sidetracked one way or another. Would you agree with that answer?
I agree. The president isn't going to change the course that an industry is going in. And this industry is clearly moving into the direction of electric, and doesn't matter which administration comes in next. As I said earlier, and I'll repeat this now, is what I think is going to what it's going to affect is going to be the long-term viability of the American brands like Ford and General Motors. I think if they're not prodded in the direction of pouring more R&D into electric vehicles, they're going to become tiny niche players sometime in 10 or 15 years from now. They're not going to be able to compete because the rest of the world is pivoting to electric vehicles. And if the next administration makes it very easy for the homegrown companies to, let's say, not worry about EVs, then they're going to pay in the long term.
All right. I have no idea how to stop this ringing, so sorry. Can you hear the ringing?
I don't.
No? Okay, good, because I have a phone ringing that I don't know how to stop in my computer. All right. Well, listen. Thanks so much for joining me. We went for an hour and a half. That's insane. It's 1:30 in the morning here in Bangkok, and it's what time is it where you're at, Tom?
It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and I don't see you on the screen. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Sorry, I did. Obviously, my brain is going. So, thanks so much, Tom, for joining me. I'm hoping we can do this again more often than, I don't know the last time I even had a live stream and you were on, but we should do this more often. It's always a pleasure. So I'll let you go now and wrap things up. And thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be back, Alex, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
All right. Okay, guys. So, by the way, if you have not seen Tom's channel, you should be arrested and tried. But there is a way to correct that. Please go to his channel, State of Charge. Honestly, and even though Tom is a personal friend of mine, he is, I would argue, one of the best, if not the best, electric vehicle journalists out there. His channel is the best channel for electric car charging. The information that he has there, not only just gold, but it comes from not only his experience of trying literally everything everywhere in all parts of the world with all types of chargers, but also talking and to people who design and make them. And it's the ridiculous amount of knowledge that Tom has in his head. I don't think anyone else has when it comes to charging electric vehicles. So if you own an electric car and would like to own an electric car and you know that charging is important, you must subscribe to his channel. It is very simple, youtube.com/state of charge. And he's also Tom Moloughney on X or Twitter, wherever you want to call it. And Tom is kicking ass in both YouTube and Twitter. So please check him out. I want to thank all of you guys for actually keeping it pretty reasonably for most of the time, sane and civil, which, I wish more of other political and any other kinds of debates would be in America. So I am going to be back here pretty much at exactly the same time, which is midnight here in Bangkok, around noon California time. So join me next time. Tom might be back. I actually am thinking about having a couple of other guests that you're very familiar, or it's just going to be me talking to you guys here in the live chat. So thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. And remember to stay charged.